Welcome to today's online learning event focusing on how to develop the future executives of your organization. My name is Patrick Sweeney, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Caliper, an international management consulting firm that for nearly a half-century has been helping companies such as Johnson & Johnson, Avis, as well as 25,000 of the world's fastest-growing companies select the right people, manage individuals most effectively, and develop productive teams. We are very excited to be able to present this event, and thank you all for attending. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping issues. On your screen, there's a question and answer box, so feel free to ask questions anytime during the presentation. We'll be answering as many of those questions as possible at the end of the webinar, and we promise to get back to anyone whose questions we don't get a chance to address shortly afterwards. As many of you are aware, these webcasts are using a fairly new technology called Voice over IP. To ensure you're getting the sound from your computer, please have your speakers turned up. To do this, use Start, Control Panel, and Sound if you are on a window-based machine. If you're still having trouble hearing, please use the call-in number that is scrolling at the top of the screen. This is not a toll-free call. A link to the archive of this webinar will be available to all registrants of this event. Please feel free to share this archive with coworkers and friends. Now I'd like to introduce the two experts you're going to be hearing from on today's webinar. With me today is Jo Moore, the Senior Vice President of Organizational Development Services at Caliper. She has a great deal of knowledge and experience in helping companies with succession planning, and Jo's going to be sharing with us various aspects of a succession planning program. Welcome to the show, Jo. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Patrick.
And we're also going to be speaking with Peter Chalk, who is the President and CEO of Central Maine Healthcare Corporation, an integrated health care provider serving Central and Western Maine. Central Maine is currently in the early stages of a succession planning process, and Peter's going to share with us his insights into what the organization has experienced so far. Now I'd like to go over what we'll discuss in today's webinar. Some of the questions we'll address are, why do organizations need a succession plan? How do you create the right plan for your company? And how does a succession plan translate into the future success of your organization? So let's dive in. I'd like to start by having Peter give us a more personal account of what an organization goes through in the succession planning process. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's great to have you with us. Before we get into the succession planning process and what you're going and why you knew that there was a need for this, do us a favor and step back, if you will, and describe for everyone the structure of your organization. How many employees you have, managers, number in your executive team. I know you also have different hospitals, and you're growing beyond that.
Central Maine Healthcare is a small integrated delivery system based out of Lewiston, Maine, which is about a third of the way up into the state. The flagship hospital, Central Maine Medical Center, is a 250-bed tertiary-level hospital offering a full range of services. We have about 3,000 employees system-wide. We have about 120 managers, and on our executive staff, and this includes, again, the entire system, it's about 17 people.
And Peter, you've been at the helm for how long?
I've been the CEO for about 8 or 9 years now. I came in as a vice president in 1983. I was in Massachusetts at the time. Opportunity came up in Maine, and even though I was kind of a New Englander by that time, I didn't know much about the state of Maine. So I concluded I'd come up here for 2 or 3 years, and 25 years later, here I am. One of the things I've always liked about Central Maine Healthcare is we're big enough to do some pretty exciting things, and we're small enough to do some pretty exciting things. So we don't have a heavy bureaucracy. We have a very supportive board. We tend to be relatively progressive inside the walls of this hospital. We're able to move pretty fast, and we have a very supportive board that lets us manage the place.
If you don't mind my asking, Peter, how much longer do you plan on staying?
Till I retire. That decision pretty much has been made. I have other challenges, and one of the reasons I'm here is I started as a vice president, and every time I got itchy, every 2 or 3 years, a fellow that I worked for would promote me, and that would keep me busy for another 2 or 3 years. So I don't know if he did it intentionally or what, but he always sort of, gave me another carrot to keep me moving on, to energize me, give me expanding my skill set and what have you. So, I got to the CEO position of Central Maine Medical Center, I think, in '99, and I'm 58 years old, and I'm happy here, and I have a lot of things I want to accomplish before I retire.
And have you picked a date?
Not at all. At this age, you begin to think about those things. At this age, my board is beginning to think about those things. Knock on wood, I'm relatively healthy. If I can stay relatively healthy, I can't imagine not working. And if I can go another, 8 to 10 years, I'd do it. I, intend to continue as long as I can add value to the organization. And perhaps in my latter years, or even now, but even more so in my latter years, I can be more of the mentor, educator, and ensure that this institution will live on.
Your enthusiasm comes through loud and clear, and that does lead us very naturally then in terms of looking at the leadership of the organization, where it will go. Why did the organization decide to put a succession plan in place, and what sort of talent issues do you find yourself facing?
My board, over the last 2 or 3 years, has more than once said, Peter, we need a succession plan. We all consider ourselves to be a bit invincible, and we keep postponing the development of such a plan. But admittedly, I know my age, and I know I'm not going to be here forever. As importantly, though, some of the key executives on this staff were all the same age. My chief operating officer is 57. Our chief financial officer is 59. The head of our group practice is in his late 50s. On and on and on. So we have a lot of senior executives in this organization that are all sort of aging at the same rate.
Well, you all built it together
and worked together for years.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a massive exodus one of these days, and that, to me, is as concerning as just me, perhaps.
Peter, I appreciate your being as open and candid as you're being about the leadership opportunities and challenges in your organization. What I find most interesting is that virtually everyone on your executive team is approaching the 60-year mark, and as they get closer to retiring, it's certainly going to have a significant impact on the organization. I'm curious to see where the audience stands with this. I'd like to throw out this question now, if I could. How soon do you expect most of your key executives to retire? In the next 1 to 5 years, the next 6 to 10 years, or are you in total denial? Everyone would just take a moment and vote. Let's see what we're... Okay. We're looking at, I'm just leaning over to see, we're looking at 17% who say they are in total denial. And of small proportion, it looks like, what is that? Like 15% now are saying within the next 5 years, and the rest saying certainly within the next 10 years. Joe, what do you think about those results?
Well, they sort of mirror studies that we've been seeing. One, for instance, the RHR International Consultancy Study showed that 20 to 25% of senior executives in the U.S. are eligible for retirement right now, and that probably half of the senior managers will retire by the year 2010. So these results, somewhat mirror those predictions.
Well, in going along with that question, you can see here that the Department of Labor found that last year, the first of about 78 million baby boomers, which is more than half of the total U.S. workforce, turned 60 years old. I think Peter's current situation with his senior executives all about the same age, all nearing retirement, really illustrates this issue. This gets to the heart of today's discussion, the need for a succession plan. Peter, at what moment did succession planning become an urgent issue for Central Maine?
All of a sudden, we got this big question, and the big question was, great strategic plan, do you have the horsepower to pull it off? And we said, I'm not sure we do. And so as good as the plan might be, if we don't have the management talent to pull it off, and this is a fairly large organization, and it's going to require the work of dozens and dozens of managers, not just a couple smart administrators to make it successful, we came back to the office and said, we're in trouble here. To implement that strategic plan and to survive and grow in a field that has become increasingly difficult and competitive and challenging, we need top-notch management talent to be able to continue. And we have had a 30-year history with Caliper, because we've always used the developmental profile when we made hiring decisions for key managers, and that's been going on for years. I was not aware, quite frankly, that Caliper offered organizational development, training, oversight, education, development, what have you, until we interviewed them. And so, make a long story short, we needed a partner to help us through our organizational development process and succession planning. We approached this whole thing from the standpoint of training up our current managers, not necessarily as developing a succession plan. Now that I know more about it, clearly that is happening to a degree, and that is clearly the next step. But first and foremost, we wanted to get our managers more skilled so that they could achieve the strategic initiatives that we've outlined for them.
So as you're looking now at talent in this different way, as you said,
yep.
How did you select the individuals who had the potential to come up to the next level?
I didn't want to totally shock the organization. So the first thing that I sort of announced was, part A is that we want to train and educate our managers at a higher level so that they can help us implement the strategic initiatives and operate in this complex environment that we're currently in. Translated, what does that mean? Translated is, I have confidence in you, I believe in you, and I'm willing to invest in you. Interestingly enough, as we've rolled out education, as we've raised the bar, as we've increased expectations, accountability, we've had some managers already that have left and said, I can sort of see where this is going, and I'm not up for the task, or I don't have the energy. So we've already had 2 key managers that have left, and we have replaced those 2 managers with 2 internal people that are doing superb. So that was a little subtle shake-up that I think got people's attention and say, hey, this is a new day. If you work with us and you're energized and you want to grow and you want to learn, you got a future in this organization. But if you don't have the energy to do that, you might want to think about something else.
And how many people did you choose for that initial program?
We identified a pool of about, I forget the number, 12, 14 managers across the system that had very high potential. We're developing that team and growing their experiences and exposure to the organization, getting them to work more cross-divisionally and across the hospital, sometimes even across the system.
And does the organization then look at this group as the next generation of leaders?
Absolutely.
So that's very big.
Absolutely. And recognizing that, they're not all there yet, but clearly, if we had an opening, we'd certainly look to that group to see if we couldn't fill that. And I know a year from now, they'll be even more prepared to fill one of our potential openings. So yes, that's absolutely true. And, we're not ignoring, and this is a delicate balance, we're not ignoring the other 110. We're still doing a lot of programs for that. And who knows, this high potential pool might cycle through a year or 2, and then we might hopefully bring another group through the same kind of intensive training and education. These people are growing, they're willing and able to expand their horizons, work on projects. And, we're sort of at the initial phase, but I got to tell you, just walking around the place, attending regional management meetings, I can read people pretty well. There's a lot of enthusiasm in this group. They're fired up. Mm-hmm. They're good people. We're giving them the tools to even perform at a higher level, and they're excited. We got a good team here. They're winners. They want to win. They want to perform. And it's great to sort of go through this with them.
And I sense that. I hear that very clearly in your voice. When Jack Welch was getting ready to step down from GE, he said something to the effect of, whoever the next leader of GE is going to be, he's not going to be like Jack Welch, because the organization will change. It's got to be a very peculiar experience for you, because you're not just training somebody to step into your shoes, because your shoes will be very different. The organization will be different. You need somebody who can view things knowing that it's going to be a very, very